Hello everyone. Today I'll be covering relics in support. We'll be covering basically when you should be running certain relics, why they're good, and like the situations the certain upgrades are best for. Support, in my opinion, is simply the most exciting role, right, when it comes to relics because you have the most variance and options and what to build each game. It's different every game. That's just awesome. So with that in mind, it is pretty important to understand what relics you should be building in each match, and what relics and when you should be upgrading them, and what upgrades you should be taking. I try to get my relics upgraded, basically level 12, but at the very latest, you're upgrading your relics before, if you're building it, right before you get Relic Dagger. That's when you want it. If you don't have your relics upgraded by the time you have Relic Dagger, there's no reason for you to have Relic Dagger. I mean, it just loses so much value. But that's basically your deadline, is if you build Relic Dagger, make sure you have your relics built by then. But generally, you want your relics upgraded at around level 12 to 14. It depends from support to support, though. So we're going to start off with Shell, because Shell is just the first relic that comes to most people's minds when they think of support, right? It's like your standard support relic. It is strong in general, but it finds its greatest value against auto attack dive specifically, or I mean, just space shell. That's where it finds its most value. In the following situations, you'll build the upgrades for shell. Let me look it up. So, phantom shell. Oops. Phantom shell. You'll be building this relic into gods like Emoja, Ymir, and Odin. Basically, gods that can lock your team down with walls. You're just building this relic, and it's very, very much standard into those three gods. If you're not building Phantom into Umoja, Ymir, and Odin, either they're playing really bad and you don't care, or you're trolling, right? That's just how it is. If you see those gods, you're building Phantom Shell. It is what it is. Fortifying Shell. If you're building Shell and you don't need Phantom Shell, you're just building Fortifying Shell. That's just the reality. There's no reason to build Phantom Shell unless they have walls. If they don't have walls and you have Shell, you build Fortifying Shell, because it just makes your team extremely tanky once the shield wears off, right? So it's just a very strong team fight relic for keeping your teammates alive to survive basically burst damage, right? Next up, we're going over meditation. Oh, it's cloak, right? Okay. So med is very strong on supports that are heavily reliant on cooldowns, or into comps that, or if your comp doesn't have a lot of healing, you can kind of get away with it. But basically, most of the time you're building med, you're really building it for the Cloak of the Aesthetic upgrade, because it gives your teammates and yourself, I believe it's a total of 6 seconds of cooldowns reduction, which is just insane. That's just huge in a team fight, because that means you're getting your, if you're support with like multiple CC abilities, you're getting those back instantly. And if you're backline, like your mage, if you're near your mage and you use this, they're just getting their burst damage back really quickly. So it's just very strong for the cooldowns. If you're running it for Cloak of the Avatar, this is very a niche sort of relic. I wouldn't really build it, but if you're looking to have some fun, it can be fun to use. But generally speaking, you're building Cloak of the Aesthetic, however you pronounce that. So yeah, this is just a relic. Mainly you're building for the upgrade, but its healing and mana sustain is decent, but it's not the main part of the relic. Next up, we'll be going over Ankh. This relic is essentially, it's not based on your team comp and what you want. It's based off the enemy team comp. It's a counter build relic. So if their team provides AoE healing and AoE shielding, right? Or just AoE healing, let's say single target shielding, if they happen to provide both, Ankh is very, very strong in the comps that provide lots of healing and shielding, and you'll be running it basically whenever you see that. The most Basically, the biggest example of this is Umoja. If you're into Umoja, you are going to be building, and you can go Blighted or Drowned Ankh, it doesn't matter, but I think Drowned Ankh is better. You're going to build the Ankh into Umoja, because not only does she provide AoE healing, she provides AoE shielding. And if you build Ankh into her, you're shutting down her 2 and her passive with one item. You're literally just shutting her down. So it's just a very strong relic to build into Umoja. But in general, you can build this into gods like Hel, Aphrodite, stuff like that. And if they have a healer, and then let's say they have Charon as well, right? Because he gives AoE shields. If his team hits the enemies, he twos. Ankh is very strong into that as well. But I would not build Ankh just for a Charon. If you're building Ankh just for the anti-shielding, I recommend building either Erosion or Sunder instead. It's just that Ankh does happen to do both, so if they have healing and shielding, it's very strong. Now, Blighted Ankh or Drowned Ankh is very strong if you have a lot of lockdown on your team, or if the enemies are forced to stand still to receive the heals, right? Because if you keep them in place when they're healing, they get the miasmas under them. That does the true damage, and it refreshes the Ankh debuff. So let's say they have a Ra and a Terra, right, on their team, or one of those gods. If they stand in the heal, which also gives protections on both those gods, they will be taking lots of damage. So they have to leave the heal, which just gives your team fight a big advantage. If you have Blighted Ankh, basically this is just if you don't have a lot of lockdown or they're not forced to stand still. It doesn't have as long duration potential, but they take more damage from your team when they're Ankhed. And your team also receives a portion of their healing. All healing reduced by this effect. So your team receives the healing instead of the enemy team. Next up, I'm going over wings. This relic is a bit more niche in application than other support options. As wings is more of a sort of, it can be used mainly as a counter build relic, but can also be used just to make your engage stronger. I'd say wings are good. Obviously, it removes slows, so having slow immunity on your team, if they have a alt or lots of abilities that slow, wings is very strong. But wings is also very strong into sort of high damage like alts that you need to escape, or if you just need to like leave a team fight and re-engage later. So let's say they have Cupid ult, Baba Aga ult, or Houyi ult. Wings is pretty strong into those, as you immune the slows and your team can kite out of them. The more useful upgrade, I guess in general, is Entangling Wings, as it does apply a root. This can be used to help your team disengage, or it can just help your team engage the enemies, right? While Hasten Wings is just very strong for your ADC to sort of just run around and hit everybody. Or if you have like a melee auto attacker that doesn't have Hasten Katana, this is good for them as well. So that's sort of Wings summarized. Thorns. For Thorns, there's basically just one thing to say. If you play Kuzumbo, you're building Thorns, and that basically sums up Thorns. You're not building this on most supports, but if you are Kuzumbo, or if they have if for some reason they have like 3 auto attackers and like an Anubis for their mage or something like that, sure, go Thorns. But generally speaking, you are not building Thorns on support unless you're playing Kuzumbo, and the reason you're probably playing Kuzumbo is because of what I said previously. If they have lots of auto attackers, or a mage that has sort of tick damage, like high tick damage. So that's it for Thorns. That's all we're going to talk about. Not much to say about that relic. Sunder, the main purpose of the relic is obviously you're reducing their shields. So this is very good if you're thinking about, let's say they have a Nike or a Geb, right? You're in a team fight, Nike uses their ult or Geb shields somebody, you Sunder them, that shield's going away, they're going to die. Okay, that's just that simple. It really is. It's a very strong relic to counter stuff like that. Sundering Blast, the upgrade, this is a really good upgrade. Not just for anti-shielding, but just for basically making the enemies take more damage. and you can deal a lot of damage with the relic as a support. So if you have abilities that bring all the enemies together, like group them up, or just massive AoE CCs, and you pop a Sunder on them, you are dealing a lot of damage. It's like 400, 500 damage, something crazy, right? And they're going to take more damage, and that's multiple people you can hit. Sunder and Siphon, you're not really ever building this on support. It's more of like, and it's never built in general. So I would not build Sunder and Siphon as a support. And that's it for Sunder. Next, we're covering Blink. Blink is very strong on supports with very strong engaged tools, such as Geb, obviously, right? Characters like Geb, Ares, Sobek. If you have high CC or high damage ultimates that need you to get close to the enemies so that you can get a good engage on them, Blink is very good. And what this allows you to do is if you have mobility, right? Let's say you Blink ult as Geb, okay? This gives you the option to use your rollout to either continue chasing a dive or to back up and help your team. So you can do both engage and peel at the same time as a character like Geb. So this is just mainly for gods that require engage. Now, Fire Blink is a bit harder to get the benefits out of unless you're playing a specific character. Like if you're playing Tyr or Herc support, or even Ares support or Sobek, you can pull them into the flames, and you get some good damage value. You can do a lot of damage with Blink. But the more the simpler, easier relic to use is the Corrupted Blink. You get near them with the Blink, it applies a slow and attack speed slow, which is useful to make the engage easier. Yeah, that's about it for Blink. It's an engage relic. That's really it. Bracer. This is my favorite support relic because I love vision control on support. So Bracer gives multiple benefits. They include obviously the power buff, the movement speed buff, and vision control. Standard Bracer just gives it just acts as a regular ward, right? So it's not the best. But if it gets broken, you get part of the cooldown back. So you can almost have these wards up permanently, right? These bracers, and it just adds as a good vision for your team. Now, bracer is obviously one of the main applications is objective control, and then objective shred, because it allows your team to do increased damage to the objectives if you place it near an objective. It can be used for like a laning phase, like place it down in the lane, or it can be used for chases or disengages, like if you need the movement speed to get in or out. But generally speaking, you're using it for objective control. In terms of upgrades, you like 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you're going Bracer Brilliance. It's just it gives you a lot more value than Bracer of Illumination. Because although this gives you a bit more vision, it's just it's like a line, and it's very hard to manipulate to actually get good value out of it. So if you're like experimenting and you have the time to experiment how to use this properly, it could be good. But generally speaking, you're just going to get this for the increased movement speed. And yeah, I mean, that's about it when it comes to Bracer. And obviously when you upgrade it, it turns into a Sentry Ward, which is the big part of it, right? It means you just place it on the objective, you break their wards. What I do like is comboing this with Eldritch Dagger. Because Eldritch Dagger, when you use a relic, you get increased prots and you gain the ability to see wards. Which means when you place the bracer on an objective, you can run around the objective and break all ward control the enemy team has on the objective. So that is pretty nice, being able to deny more enemy vision with the dagger. So that's it for Bracer. Next up, another relic I like using a lot is Horrific. Horrific is a very strong peel or dive tool when used on multiple enemies, and is specifically strong when a fight is fully committed. So like if the team can't escape or you can't escape, that's where Horrific comes in clutch, because it just reduces everything the enemies want to do. They want to be able to chase you down, or they want to be able to run away. They lose movement speed. They want to be able to auto attack a lot. They lose their attack speed. And they want to be able to do damage. They lose damage. So overall, this just heavily favors you in the team fight. that you are in. Even if they can immune the attack speed and movement speed slows, the Relic's still strong because of the damage reduction. In terms of upgrades, I believe I have to type an emblem. Yeah, in terms of upgrades, you are basically always going Emblem of Increasing Peril, because this just increases the basically the strength of the Relic significantly as the fight goes on. So you're just making them do less damage, have less attack speed, less movement speed. So it's just the better upgrade. This one, if you're looking to have some fun, or if you're just looking to, I don't know when this is useful. The difference is, though, between their application is you have to deal damage to an enemy for Trembling Terror, but the enemies have to do damage to allies for Increasing Peril. So that's the main difference between the two. Next up, we're talking about Frenzy. I better type in Bell. It should come up. Frenzy is another relic that is good to basically turn a team fight in your favor. But it is a multi-purpose relic, as it can be used in team fights, but it could also be used for the objective shred that basically gives your team, right? I think it combos very well, depending on what you're looking to do with it. If you're looking to shred objectives with Belt, you'll be going Belt of Berserker, because that's just the better objective shred relic, since it gives, I believe it's 10% increased damage more than regular Belt, yeah, and 15% more attack speed, but it diminishes over time. It decays. So basically, right away, you're getting a massive burst of attack speed and damage on your team. If you're doing objectives, it combos very well with Bracer, because both of these relics combined, your team's just doing insane damage to objectives, and obviously Bracer gives you really good objective control, so it's just a very strong combo. If you're looking to team fight with Belt, it combos very well with Horrific, because between these two relics, you're increasing your team's damage capabilities and you're decreasing the enemy's damage capabilities, which basically just puts the advantage to you at full swing, right? Your team has the advantage. One of the main differences is Belt of Berserker only lasts 6 seconds and it decays in effect. Belt of the Insatiable Hunger lasts 8 seconds. It obviously gives less damage and attack speed, but if you get a kill or an assist, the cooldown refreshes, or the duration refreshes, so you get another 8 seconds, which means very unlikely, but you could potentially have 16 seconds, right, of this buff. Obviously, you're probably not going to get that unless your team somehow gets a kill at the last second of the Belt, but still, that's a lot of potential time for your team to have the Belt upgrade to your team. So just basically a team buff relic used for team fights or for objective shred. Now, last but not least, well, actually, this is pretty much the least. Beads. Not really a support relic. I'm only choosing to cover it because sometimes supports build beads. You're only really building it if the enemy team has very, very, very strong lockdowns that'll kill you in the early to mid game, basically before you can get a bubble online. Before you can get, I believe it's called Magi's Cloak. If you can get a Magi's Cloak, if you can survive the early to mid game to get a Magi's Cloak, you should probably just run that instead of beads. But beads is good, let's say if they have like Dodgy, Ares, stuff like that, right? And you're just don't have a CC immune ult, so you need the beads to actually survive. You can run it, but generally speaking, you're not running beads support. So that basically sums it up for this relic guide. I hope some of this information was informative. For the most part, I'm just reading what the relics do and explaining what it really means, but so it's not very in-depth. If you need more in-depth explanations, I recommend looking up some support guides online. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, comment down below, and catch y'all later.